So, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for our Regional Synergies webinar. And we are your host, Heather Halgrimson from Co-operatives First, our Director of Entrepreneurship. And I am Trista Puapiscaneas, Director of Indigenous Relations. We're really happy that everybody is able to join us here today. So today we are going to do a panel, some Q&As, and just hear more about this amazing partnership that happened in BC. It will be interactive, so feel free to ask questions at the end of the panel. And if you have questions beforehand or you're too shy to ask, feel free to put them in the chat and we will ask them at that time. So if this is your first event with Co-operatives First, welcome. We are a business development organization focused on creating awareness and supporting new co-op development in Western Canada. We wouldn't be able to do this without the support of our funder, Federated Co-op, on behalf of the cooperative retailing system. So all of the co-op branded stores and gas stations you see throughout Western Canada, and so without their support, Co-operatives First wouldn't be here. So if you are working with a co-op or just wondering how co-ops work, please feel free to get in touch with Heather or myself. And we support co-ops through incorporation, business planning, governance, any type of support, early days, getting people together. That's what we do. So this is Regional Synergies. It's a webinar series that we feature initiatives where Indigenous and non-Indigenous groups have worked together to create economic development opportunities. The purpose of this is to show collaborative, local, win-win solutions for all participants in different projects. We believe that these could be supported by like the co-op business structure, or it does not have to be, but we're really passionate about creating these win-win opportunities and these partnerships. We hope by hearing these stories you are inspired and maybe even consider a co-op in your future, so to create local opportunities. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to sign up for my newsletter. It's called Your Way Together, so you can find it on yourwaytogether.ca to hear about upcoming opportunities or different case studies and just hearing about Indigenous co-op development. And we have put up a link in the chat. So today's discussion is taking in virtual space, but I wanted to let everybody know we Co-operatives First is located on the Treaty 6 territory, homeland of the Métis. We are in an area that's actually located not too far from the Wanuskewin Heritage Park that has been a meeting and gathering place where different tribes have been meeting for over 6,000 years. So we're really lucky to be coming from this area. So today's program, we will start with our panel discussion with Greg, Frank, and David. And after the presentations, we will do a panel discussion and then move on to the Q&As. So we have muted everybody's line and we are being recorded. So if you want to hear more or reach out, you will have the chance to rewatch this webinar again in the future. So I will pass it off to Heather for the introductions.
Thanks, Trista. I'm just going to do some pinning here. Bear with me. Okay, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm Heather, and I do entrepreneurship support with Co-operatives first. So we're going to just start off with, we thought before we moved into the panel, we'd give a chance for every sort of person who's on the panel to give a little bit of background about where they're coming from and sort of up to the point where this partnership formed, although it's pretty loose. So, you know, you can sort of say what you want to say, but I think to give a little bit more background, we're going to let everybody just have about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll roll into the panel. So I've asked David Hurford to come up first. So this is the point where I'd be like, welcome to the stage, but welcome to the pin, David. So a little bit of an introduction about David Hurford. He is part of the BC Craft Farmers Co-operative, and the cooperative exists to provide meaningful connection and coordinate business activities between members that fosters and optimizes a path and market for craft cannabis producers in BC. So David has over 20 years of experience working in senior roles with federal, provincial, municipal governments, crown corporations, nonprofit, and a top 40 global university. So we met David through working with Co-operatives first, actually, on some business planning through the BC Craft producers. And actually, this is a kind of a little bit momentous for us because the first time in our Regional Synergies webinars that we've actually been able to feature a client of ours. So welcome, David, and please tell us a little bit more about the co-op and what led you to this collaboration. So take it away.
Yeah, happy to. Thanks, Heather, for the introduction. Really happy to be here. I'm in Winnipeg today, so greetings from Manitoba. And thanks also for the introduction. As Heather said, I've got about actually closer to 30 years now in public affairs experience. The first 10 were with Mr. Chrétien's government in Ottawa and British Columbia. I was a senior political advisor and policy advisor to a number of ministers. David Anderson being one in British Columbia. He's the Minister of Revenue and Fisheries and Transport and the Environment. And then I went to Ottawa and worked closely with Alan Rock, who was the Minister of Health, and then eventually the Minister of Industry. That's where I was really introduced to the cannabis file from a policy perspective. You may recall in 1999, 2000, we were really fighting the AIDS epidemic. We had national AIDS strategy. We were making a lot of drugs, experimental drugs available to people. And one of those was cannabis, which was a controlled substance. And a lot of people approached us who were dying and said, cannabis helps me with my quality of life. And those who weren't dying, it helped them with other things as well. So we were also introducing a palliative care strategy at the same time with Senator Carstairs. So those two files really landed in my lap as an advisor to the minister, and we carried them forward. And what you see as a result of that is the medical cannabis regime that is still in place today. It was quite controversial at the time. Our own officials hated it at Health Canada, but we were doing it in response to really legitimate concerns and quality of life concerns from people who were suffering. So the minister felt that it was important that he have a compassionate policy, and we pushed that forward, and it's still in place today despite a couple of court challenges. The Conservative government tried to get rid of the program, and under that program, but it was protected by the Supreme Court. And under that program, medical patients were able to receive their cannabis from what we call designated growers. So if you were a cancer patient in British Columbia and you needed cannabis, but you didn't know how to grow it yourself, you could designate somebody else to grow it for you. And that person could grow cannabis for up to 4 people. So that was the system that we regulated. And as of today, there are about 40,000 people across Canada that have that license. Many have renewed it decades in a row. And in British Columbia, for example, there's 7,000 with that license, and that program's been going quite well. That was really the precursor to legalization. It was legalization. We did legalize cannabis for thousands of people in the country. After I left the Chrétien government, I came to Manitoba, worked for Premier Dewar on the expansion of the floodway, worked very closely in my federal roles and in my provincial role with Indigenous governments and leadership, which I found very rewarding as a prairie kid to be able to work on these issues with Indigenous government leaders was a real honor for me, and I really took to it early in my career, and I was lucky to have Ministers Rock and Anderson who were very encouraging of that, and Premier Dewar, of course, was as well. And we set aside hundreds of millions of dollars of the floodway expansion for Indigenous owned companies and guaranteed at least 25% of the jobs on the project for Indigenous workers. And that was about a $1 billion construction project. So really saw how large projects could benefit from Indigenous engagement. To some extent, the program was developed to benefit Indigenous communities, but Indigenous communities and construction companies really benefited the project because they did great work and started winning the competitive bids that were outside the Indigenous set aside. So that was really encouraging. After that, I went to Vancouver. I worked there for the mayor for a few years, getting ready for the Olympics, which obviously had a large Indigenous component to it. I was honored to do that work. And then after that, moved into seniors care, then eventually worked for a large care providers association around elder care. And then I worked for a Crown corporation in British Columbia called Community Living BC, which serves adults with developmental disabilities. They were having a lot of challenges at the time. So as part of a group that went in to try and kind of restructure them and get them back on their feet. Again, a lot of work there with Indigenous communities around issues similar to what was in Jordan's principle in terms of the quality of service and continuance of services in terms of adults with developmental disabilities and receiving supports. And making sure that they weren't falling through the cracks. So that was really rewarding, and we managed to get CLBC an agreement with Indigenous governments for CLBC to provide services on reserve, which was a big breakthrough. So I was really honored to do that. And then I went to UBC for a couple of years and was chief of staff for the president of UBC. And that was right around our centennial. And we did a lot of work around reconciliation, truth and reconciliation. UBC, large Indigenous center there, was really proud to be working on all of those things as well. And then after UBC, I went back into the seniors care sector. And I've been there up until September, where I retired after about 7 years in the seniors care sector. And you can imagine it's been a long haul with COVID. So I was a part of the provincial response and part of the sector's response, leading it in terms of the COVID-19 and long-term care. And of course, we lost thousands of seniors through that process. So that's my professional career. Cannabis, I stayed with cannabis a little bit after my term in the Chrétien government. I was an activist within the Liberal Party. I was the national policy secretary for the Liberal Party for 2 years, first 2 years of Mr. Trudeau's term. But before that, I was an activist as a policy chair in British Columbia, and we were pushing many policies, one of them related to cannabis, which was full legalization of cannabis, to get that into the Liberal Party's national platform. We were unsuccessful in 2005, and then in 2011, I led a group from BC Young Liberals of Canada, and we successfully got the Liberal Party of Canada to agree to the legalization of cannabis. And then Mr. Trudeau became leader, and he made the commitment, and the rest is history, as we should say. And cannabis has now been legal for the last coming up to 4 years. I've not been professionally involved in the cannabis sector. I've been working in these other areas. But after a couple of years of legalization, it became clear that there were problems, big problems for us in British Columbia, in the sense that we had the best cannabis farmers in the world by far, thousands of them literally, and the system that was set up by the federal government was just not letting them into the system. And it was really bad, and it was difficult for these thousands of people trying to transition. And of course, they're the best farmers in the world, so this is the cannabis that consumers want. That's one of the reasons we still have a persistent black market, is because these small farmers have not been able to transition. So I started getting calls from a lot of people who were concerned, given my history, and started to look at solutions, and we started to organize. Luckily, I had a lot of connections from my previous life working on the medical regs, and we said we need to organize these farmers in some sort of a cohesive way. They've been hiding kind of for decades, so it's a tough group to organize. But we had a lot of leaders who were trusted, and we looked around for models. It could be an association, a nonprofit society, And we really landed on a cooperative. BC has a terrific Cooperatives Act, and it kind of met all the tests for us in terms of transparency, democracy, all the good things you know about co-ops. So we went down that road and we had a lot of support, and we established the co-op to really do three things. The main mission is to transition as many farmers as we can to the legal system, BC craft farmers. The second is to make sure that BC stays the preeminent #1 place in the world for cannabis. Germany's legalizing within 10 years. I think this will be a multi-billion-dollar global industry, creating tens of thousands of jobs all over the world. And we want BC to stay the heart of that industry, which it is right now. We're in danger of losing that. That comes with a lot of jobs. And then the third mission is to make sure consumers have choice. So cannabis consumers walking into a cannabis store in Kelowna will have a choice of buying from a local farmer or a big corporation based out of the United States. Right now, they really only have one choice, and that is to buy cannabis that's being grown by large corporations, most of which are headquartered in the United States. So we're there to try and change that and dramatically disrupt the marketplace. And almost return it to where it was before, which was local farmers who are passionate about their craft, producing cannabis, not just for BC, but across Canada and around the world. So that's the goal of the co-op. We've been operating now just before the pandemic. We opened, and we've been going at it for about 2.5 years. And we are pooling our members' political clout. We're pooling their purchasing power, and we're trying to pool their marketing strength at the same time. So we have a couple hundred members, and it's gone quite well, and governments are certainly listening to us. And we wanted to create the organization to be a credible voice for craft farmers, professional voice for craft farmers in terms of dealing with the government, because the government just affects their entire livelihood now, their financial and social well-being. Through this process, of course, we believe that you cannot talk about BC cannabis without talking about Indigenous farmers. The BC Cannabis brand is, to me, very much doesn't exist without the Indigenous reality of the province. I think what is real for us is that what makes BC cannabis different than everything else is not necessarily the cannabis itself, but the people who grow it and the place that it's grown. And the place that we grow cannabis is on unceded territory. It's magical, historic territory of the Indigenous people. There's a terroir to the region that makes it unique, similar to the way you might see unique regions of the world around Champagne and other kind of areas like that. Just the geography of the place affects the quality. And we believe that is truly the case with BC cannabis. And as we've traveled across the province, we knew this already, but it's very clear that many of our best cannabis farmers are Indigenous growers, and Indigenous people have been using cannabis long before we ever got here. So we respect that, and we've tried to really, I guess, build that into our DNA, into the organization. And so when we start to do events, or activities, we really look for ways to make sure that Indigenous voices are included. Our founding board, 3 of our 8 members were Indigenous members of our founding board. So it's been really important for us to do this. And it is, to me, the only way to operate, not only in British Columbia, but across Canada. So we want to be leaders in that regard. I guess in terms of the specific demonstration of that, we obviously were locked down during COVID with everybody else. We weren't able to get out. And then finally last spring, we felt we were able to get out. So we started planning a summit in Kelowna, BC for April 20th. It was kind of our coming out party that we never got to have with COVID. And it was the first chance that these amazing farmers, got together in a room. Picture the 500 best basketball players in the world, or the 500 best hockey players in the world getting in a room together. Well, that's what we had. And a lot of these people never met each other because they've been hiding away from law enforcement. So it was really a magical experience, bit of a revival sense of getting them all together. But as we were planning it, knowing that we were in Kelowna, knowing that the history of that territory, we felt we could not plan this summit without seeking permission and fully involving Indigenous peoples, especially with what we knew about the reality of cannabis and its history. So we were working closely with Tourism Victoria. We were working, or Tourism Kelowna, I'm sorry. working closely with cooperatives first, and they led us to Moccasin Trails and Greg and Frank, and said this is a company that really has a good track record of in the tourism industry, but obviously with the pandemic, tourism wasn't happening, and we said absolutely, this is exactly where we would want to start. This was a few months before the summit, and we were introduced to Greg and Frank, and it just went swimmingly after that, and we were able to fully integrate Greg and Frank into our planning. They guided us every step of the way, and we had a great event that was the beginning of a really good partnership. So we felt that it was not a one-off, that we needed to really, make it a substantive partnership, and we have continued to collaborate after the summit was over. And the Indigenous elements of the summit were, when we talked to delegates, by far the most appreciated of the group. And, a lot of our delegates go to big cannabis summits. There's huge ones, Toronto, Vancouver, all over the world. And they said ours was by far the best, by far the most authentic and true to what the BC cannabis industry was. And virtually all of them cited the role that Indigenous leaders played in the event. And that was all thanks to the work of Greg and Frank guiding us along the way. We didn't know what to do, but we wanted to do the right thing, and they helped us. So that's a little bit of the partnership and how we got set up, and we're continuing to work together, and I suspect we'll be working together for as long as I'm still breathing. So, and as long as our co-op is running. So it's been a great collaboration, and happy to talk more about it as we roll along.
All right, thanks so much, Dave. I'm just going to switch it up a little bit, and we'll have a chance to talk a little bit more about this. And of course, if anyone has, I'm always in favor of, if you have a question, unburden yourself as soon as possible, but just throw it in the chat so you don't forget it. And then we'll get to them a little bit later. So I'm just going to do the old switcheroo on stage here. For our Zoom stage. And, okay. Greg, I'm inviting you up. And Frank, I'm not sure. Okay, so I'm going to introduce Greg. And okay, I think I got everything going, and then I'll unpin myself. Greg Hopf, Seahawks fan. Okay. All right, so Greg Hopf is a Dene Indigenous tourism leader and Indigenous youth activist who's passionate about building thriving Indigenous communities, sharing stories and cultural traditions in an authentic and meaningful way. So in 2017, Greg joined forces with business partner Frank Antoine to launch a tourism company called Moccasin Trails, which you've heard a little bit about. And they grew the business into an award-winning tourism company. But as you're going to hear, tourism in COVID-19 requires a little bit of innovation and change. So have a little bit of a pivot there. And in addition to the tourism business, Greg is co-founder of Moccasin Trails Consulting, which is focused on economic development, tourism development, partnership between Indigenous and non-Indigenous organizations, and various other things, including delivering keynote presentations and training and workshops. So I guess that's a little bit by way of teaser. So I'll let you take it away, sort of what brought you to the moment, I guess, of the partnership with the craft farmers. So go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Heather. Yes, my name is Greg. I'm coming to you and zooming into you from the traditional territory of the Syilx Nation, which is the Syilx Nation and the Okanagan's people. I am in my home office here in West Kelowna. But yeah, very excited to be with you guys today. And speaking about our unique partnership with BC Craft Farmers Co-op. So a lot of you right off the bat probably wondering, what the heck is a tourism business, partnering up with cannabis? Well, you know what, we were asking that same question too during the first few phone calls. But we live in an age now, and especially COVID, what it really taught us was just survival mode. I'll go briefly into Moccasin Trails tourism, and then kind of how we got to this unique partnership that we're discussing today. So I am a Dene Indigenous man from the north, and not northern BC, like from the north, like Santa Claus country, up in like the Northwest Territories. So I left the north at a teenager, and lived a very traditional childhood. My grandfather was a hunter and trapper, and so I remember being 5, 6, 7 years old, being shoved on the back of his skidoo and checking traps, like at 5 o'clock in the morning in minus 30 below. So yeah, so crazy times. My grandmother was a midwife, so I remember being in her house, which is basically a cabin in the bush in the Northwest Territories, and delivering babies, helping her deliver babies, and like fetching water and getting rags and towels and making sure that the new mother was okay, and making sure the fire in the stove was kept warm for her. And so that was my childhood. That was my upbringing. So very traditional. My grandparents were very traditional, very in tune with their culture. And my mother was your classic residential school survivor. I have no qualms about that. She is the poster child of what they've set out to do. To this day, she still is an alcoholic. She still battles with alcohol. She still battles with trauma. She still hasn't dealt with it like many of our Indigenous Canadians have. She hasn't. So I was basically toured around my whole family. And my family, it takes a village to raise a child. That was the exact case in my childhood. My aunt, my mom's sister, my aunt took me for a little while. My uncle took me for a few years. My grandparents took me for a few years. My other aunts took me for a few years. My other uncle took me for a few years. And so that was my childhood. Throughout all of this, I was a pretty good hockey player. I don't know how that ever came to be, but my aunt really stepped in and said, "You got something special here. I'm going to ship you out." And so I went to Saskatchewan and played junior hockey in Saskatchewan as a teenager, left the Northwest Territories, lived in Saskatchewan, lived in LeBret, Indian Reserve, just outside of Fort Capel, played junior hockey there for a few years, and then went to university and got my kinesiology degree because, of course, and I played hockey there. So of course, that's what every student athlete always goes for is kinesiology, because that's all we know. So I got my kinesiology degree, and then I was just having a little too much fun with the game of hockey. And so I asked my coach at the time, I was like, "Is there any options for me? I'm still pretty decent at this sport." I was only 23 years old. And so I went over to Europe. I went and lived in the Czech Republic for a couple of years and played professional hockey there. Came back home to the Northwest Territories and was thrust into a leadership role right away. Our Dene national chief at the time was Bill Erasmus. He basically took me and said, "You know what, you're going to go into all of our Indigenous communities and you're going to start speaking to the youth and you're going to rally the youth. We want to give the youth a voice." So I went around to every single one of our communities in the Northwest Territories, all 33 of them. And I would spend quite a bit of time there and just really having real good discussions with the youth of every community. And these were discussions about, what's on their mind, and there's issues ranging from, sniffing gas to your typical drugs and alcohol and, rape and all of this. So it was just a really eye-opening experience in my young 20s, listening and being exposed to all of this. And so we gave the youth a voice. And so whenever our chiefs meet in the Northwest Territories, there's 33 chiefs. Whenever we meet, our youth always had a spot on the agenda. And it was never me speaking because, again, it was them. So I would give them the podium and they would then talk about the issues that were affecting them in their communities and how do we deal with them as a leadership. And then we took that national, and then we had a spot on the AFN national agenda right across Canada. So that's what I did for a number of years. Then I got into diamond mining. Basically, diamond mining is huge up in the territories. To this day, it contributes about 25 to 30% of the world's diamond population. So they were building their mines and they needed some guy to go into the Indigenous communities and talk about what a great company they were. And so at the end of the day, looking back at it, I was basically just like a token Indian going into the communities and bragging about what great mining companies are. And so I did that for a couple of years because the money was very good. And then I couldn't do it anymore, just ethically. And my moral compass was off, and ethically, I just couldn't do it because I knew what they were doing in the background. And so Stopped doing that and then basically got into sport and went around to all of our communities in the Northwest Territories and developed sport programs for our community. Really quickly, fast forward, did that for a number of years, built the organization from very small. There was only a staff of one, myself. So, I did that for 10 years. And when we left, we had a staff of 5 and we had multi-year funding and, over $1.5 million a year in funding. So took it and really grew it. But in growing that, we kind of also outgrew the North. We lived in the capital city of Yellowknife, which is only about 20,000 people. So very, very limited opportunities, as you can imagine, growing up in Northwest Territories. My kids were growing at outgrowing the city as well. I was outgrowing the city, so we decided to move. Came down here and got a job at the Thompson Okanagan Tourism Association as an Indigenous tourism specialist. Basically doing the same work I was doing in the territories, but doing it here in the region. And instead of developing sport programs in communities, well, now we're going to develop tourism product in communities. When I got here in 2015, we had 7 Indigenous tourism operators that were memberships that were registered in this Okanagan region. And the Okanagan region is pretty big. You're talking, about the size of Ireland. The whole country of Ireland is basically the size of our Okanagan region. Many, many communities in our region. So my job was really monumental in just getting communities, first of all, to talk about Indigenous tourism and the benefits of it. And of course, as you can imagine, again, going into the communities, and some communities I was kicked out of. There was like, Greg, you know what? We're not even ready for tourism. We've got oil and gas knocking down our door. We've got energy companies. We've got forestry. We've, all of this. We're not even ready for tourism. But you have to have those discussions. And so we did that for a number of years. Anyway, fast forward, legacy was Moccasin Trails Consulting, myself and Frank, bid, and we had to bid on the largest international Indigenous tourism conference in the world. We did it in 2019. Over 700 delegates, close to 800 delegates registered here in Kelowna from all over the world for a tourism conference. And Frank and I led the bid. We won the bid. We chaired the hosting committee. And it was a very, very fun time. And it was a very great conference. To this day, they still say it's one of the most successful conferences. And then 2019. So as we were doing that, Frank and I started Moccasin Trails. And we started because we knew there was a gap in the industry. But we also knew that there were some people that were trying to capitalize on Indigenous tourism. And what I mean by that is non-Indigenous people. And they would throw up a totem pole in the front yard of their business and say, oh, we're an Indigenous business. And so there was a number of those here in BC. And so we were like, this is just wrong. Like, we want to educate people when they come into our region. Number one is we have to educate them. We have to teach them about the diversity of our Indigenous nations. We are not all the same, right? Trista's from Saskatchewan. She's an Indigenous woman from a different nation. I'm here. I'm Dene from the north. There's people here that are in the Okanagan, part of the Silk Nation or the Secwepemcúlecw Nation, in the Secwepemc territory, in the Shuswap territory. Different language, different stories, different customs, different everything. And we need to teach people that, because people were coming into the Okanagan region expecting to see Haida Gwaii culture. And it's just wrong, right? Haida Gwaii are very successful in what they've done. And I'm sure all of you know about the Haida Gwaii and the Haida Gwaii culture and stuff they're doing in tourism, which is amazing, which is awesome, they're internationally known. But because of their success, we fall under their umbrella. And everyone comes here and expecting, oh, we're going to have Haida Gwaii culture, but you're in a totally different nation, totally different area. So we had to educate people of the diversity of our nations. We did that. And we took people back to the ancestral past of our people in a canoe, walking on the hiking trails. And that's where we really, really excelled, and we really, really found our passion, was just meeting tourists and guests from around the world and sharing our stories, sharing our food, sharing our people, our language, our songs, our dances, and in an authentic way. And we really enjoyed that. And that was like our high for us. And we were really good at it. And we've won awards for the work we've done. We've won municipal awards. We won regional awards. We were nominated for 2 national awards, in our country of Canada. We were runners up in one of our awards for a startup company. So we're an award-winning company. And And it was really, really good. We're on this great rate for excelling. And then obviously COVID hit and was devastated. So, you know what, the banks still want their money. My mortgage, my house still needs to get paid. There's still fuel that needs to get put in the truck, and there's still food that needs to get put in my kids' bellies. That doesn't stop. So we were really freaking out, and it was a very dark time for us. And I'm not scared to say that. There were days where I was in the fetal position on my bed, bawling my eyes out, saying, what am I going to do? Right? I'm the man of this family. I'm supposed to provide. I couldn't do it. And there were, and to be honest, and again, I'm not shy about saying this, there were suicidal thoughts. Like, what am I doing? I can't provide for my family. I invested my whole life savings into this tourism business, and what am I doing? I'm going to lose my house. I'm going to lose my family and everything. It wasn't a good time. And of course, whenever we're at the bottom of the barrel, you reach out to someone. You know, every one of us on this workshop here and on this webinar, we all have that one person that we go to whenever times are at the most extremist. And for me, that was my aunt. And my aunt basically looked at me and said, oh my God, my boy. She said, you need to just keep things simple. She said, everything we've given you, your grandparents, me, you know, my husband, and, you know, your aunts and your uncles, and even your mom, you know, we've given you some pretty special things that's in between your ears right now. The songs we've given you, the drum songs, the dances that I've acquired, the stories, the legends, the color of my skin, the language that I speak, all of the knowledge that we've given you, you know, people want that now. And gosh darn it, people need to pay for that now. It's intellectual property. You've gained all that. We've given that to you. And when we give that to you, it's your job to share it how you see fit in a good, meaningful way. And that was it. It was just as simple as that. And then we added on a consulting arm to Moccasin Trails. So Moccasin Trails Tourism and then Moccasin Trails Consulting. It's an arm of Moccasin Trails. It's not its own company, but it's an arm of it. And then we just really, really reached out to, we surrounded ourselves with smarter people than us. And I don't mean smarter people, I just mean people that have different strengths than us. We've got great strengths, but we've also got great weaknesses. And so we needed to surround ourselves with people that had strengths in different areas that can help propel us to the next level in the consulting world. And we did that, and we found some very special people. I'm not going to name names, but there's one individual who is a very, very close personal friend of ours, and he's helped us out tremendously. And for that, I'm so grateful for. So we did that. We surrounded ourselves with those people, and then our consulting business took off. Our consulting arm of the business took off. And so we were now doing public speaking around the world. You know, I think in Australia, we're off to Australia in a month from now to speak at the World Indigenous Tourism Conference. We're all over Canada speaking. We're facilitating workshops with our neighbors now, with the municipality of Kelowna. And really, what really propelled us was surrounding ourselves with very smart people. But, and I don't know how you're going to take this, but it is reality. And that's when Kamloops 215 happened. And our phone was nonstop. And it was Canadians around the world, Canadians in our country, were like, oh my God, how did this happen on my watch? I am so disgusted with myself right now. I am ashamed to be a Canadian. I'm ashamed of my government. How can this happen? Greg, what can I do? And people, and even to this day, Canadians are still asking themselves, and even you guys on this webinar might be asking yourselves, what can I do? What can I do to fix the wrong, to right the wrongs of our country? And that's where we are as Canadians right now as a country. And how we're going to get out of this is by our people. Our people are going to bring you out of this. Our people are going to guide you and grab your hand, and we're going to walk you through this, and we're going to get out of this. But it is us. Make no mistake, it is our nations that are going to help you with this reconciliation. And it's also not our job. It's your job as non-Indigenous Canadians to reach out to Indigenous communities, Indigenous businesses such as ours, to seek advice and guidance on what can you do in playing your part for reconciliation. And so that's really what happened. So workshops, working with businesses, working with nonprofit organizations, working with government departments, everything from team building exercises with their staff to training their staff, right? Training their staff. The municipality of Kamloops reached out to us about a month after to Kamloops 215 and said, Greg, we need learnings, we need teachings. We spent 2 full days with them. We went right to the residential school. We canoed in our big style canoes. We canoed past there. We did ceremonies with them. We did songs with them. We spent 2 full days with them. And that's the work that we started doing. Well, and then you lead up to this partnership. We got a call from Tourism Kamloops. And so we've got a great relationship with Tourism Kamloops. And Tourism Kamloops are like fans of ours. And so they had said that, you and David Hurford need to partner up. They've got this cannabis conference that's happening in April 20th in 2022. You need to work with them. They are wanting to make sure that the Indigenous content they have is vetted. They want to make sure that the Indigenous inclusion that they have in their conference is meaningful. It comes from the right people. And so I'll never forget our first phone call. And David and I had our first phone call. And right off the bat, I could tell, again, as an Indigenous working with non-Indigenous, trust me, we can tell when you're sincere, and we can also tell when you're not sincere. We know that. So my very first phone call with David, I could tell this guy was sincere. I was like, this guy really wants to make sure that our Indigenous voices are heard. And it's not just an opening prayer and a traditional welcoming. And a lot of conferences, even to this day, it still happens. I was just speaking at a panel yesterday at the BC Chamber of Commerce. We need to get past just including our Indigenous voice for opening prayer and traditional welcoming. And then saying, okay, see you later. We're going to have a great conference. Thanks a lot for welcoming us. This was not that. This was about, we need to do more. And so it was that. And the first conversation I had with David, I said, thank you so much. I said, you need to realize that whenever a chief and council get together, for probably about the past year and a half, 2 years now, even longer, the cannabis issue always finds its way on the agendas of our chief and council meetings. And our chief and council meetings happen every once a month, just like municipality meetings, mayor and council. But every single chief and council meeting, cannabis always finds its way on the agenda. And there's some communities that are doing great things. There are other Indigenous communities here in the region that are still catching up. And it's not that they don't want to get in the tourism industry. It's just that they are so freaking busy with other things, with industry trying to knock down their door. Kids they got the highest suicide rate on the reservation. They've got social problems. They got all these other problems. And right now they need to heal their own communities before they start getting into cannabis. And so we have these communities that are at the ends of the spectrum. There's some great communities. And I said, David, we need to highlight those communities that are really doing great things with cannabis. And he was on board. Like, I think even before I even finished making a statement, he was like, yeah, we're in. Let's have you a big part of our agenda. Not just a token part of the agenda. Oh yeah, we did our reconciliation. We had him do opening ceremonies and traditional protocol, and that's it. We did our part for reconciliation. No, this guy was more about, we need to do more. And even to this day, we're still working. He still says we need to do more for the Indigenous communities. And so for us, it was a no-brainer to work with David and his group. And we really injected some meaningful and positive subjects and issues and messages around cannabis for his conference. And I don't think David said it, but he told us that the panel session that we had was one of the most successful panel sessions that he had in his conference, and he had multiple panel sessions over the course of 3 days. And he told us that it was one of the most successful panelists. The one that was most representative, most engaged, most feedback from was our panelists, and that panelist was showing the conference delegates the great things we're doing in cannabis. So that was how we came together, and that was what we did. And I'm sure we'll speak later, but we've got some other big things that are coming down the pipeline right now. We've got, I'm sure we'll talk about them later, but this is not a one and done. And David, I can't see him, but I'm sure he's shaking his head. I know that he's probably nodding and saying, this is not a one and done. This is going to be more. There's going to be more projects like this. So we got together for the first time, but this is not a one and done. There's going to be more projects that we're going to do together. So anyway, that's it. Don't want to take up too much of your time. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. I'm just going to pin our video here. If anyone has any questions that they want to ask right now, feel free. Otherwise, Tristan and I are going to have the opportunity to do a little bit more of an interaction here. So I think we're all up here, and I just wanted to say thank you so much for sharing and being very open and candid with us about this partnership and how it came together, and looking forward to having this discussion on exploring it a little bit more. Trista, how do you want to do the questions? You want to go first?
Sounds good. We can alternate.
Okay.
All right. So the first question is, many people who've signed up for this webinar may be just considering forming, or just looking into new partnerships. Can you tell us a bit more on why you guys saw that this partnership would add value to you and your organization? Greg touched on reconciliation, but did the financial benefits ever play a factor, or were they ever a factor in creating this partnership?
Do you want to go first, David? You want me to go first?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. Well, I think there's a million reasons to do it. It would, it's just such a natural thing to me. I can't imagine not doing it, quite frankly. So it just was, as Greg used the term no-brainer. For us, it's just obvious that this is something that we all should be doing. So we didn't even think a minute about it. It was just, yes, this is something we need to do. The question was, could we find the right people, and would they trust us? And so I think we know that trust is not built in one meeting or one conference. So we knew we were in it for the long term. So it was very easy for us to do it. Like I said, I couldn't imagine us not doing it. And I was just at a large cannabis event in Ottawa. It was all the big guys, the huge, the people in the cannabis industry, and they had their conference in Ottawa. It was 2 days. And I have to tell you, I spent time in there. I did not locate one Indigenous person. Maybe they were there, but I sure didn't see them. And, that was really troubling to me, that I don't think they even thought about it. It wasn't even an issue for them. I would have been, I don't know how you can have a cannabis event in this country without having Indigenous people, any kind of, frankly, event these days. When it comes to government engagement. And I was really disappointed by that. I was really disappointed because it just isn't the natural thing to do. And so for us, it was a no-brainer. Our board was very supportive, and money had nothing to do with it. The work that Greg and Frank did for us was priceless. So when it comes to, I shouldn't say that too loud, because they probably would increase their rate next time. But no, it was it was just the right thing to do. And the work that Greg and Frank did, you just can't put a price tag on that kind of work, the way they educated me personally, our group. Yeah, it's really great.
Yeah, for us, it was right off the bat, we at that time, not so much, but now we get asked a lot for partnerships and, oh, we want to do stuff with you. And we get that a lot. And for us, the number one thing we look at is shared values, number one. And so do you share the same values that Frank and I have? And sorry, by the way, I got to back up. Frank, I do apologize. He's not on with us. He's actually just been texting him. He's got some issues in his communities right now. So he is my business partner, but he's also Kuki, which is chief in our communities. So he is chief of his communities, and he's doing putting out some fires in his community right now as the chief role, which we all know is a 24/7 role. So I do apologize. He's not on here. He did want to send his regrets. So, but Frank and I, we always look at, shared values. Does this potential partner, does he share the same values that we do? Does he get it? And what I mean by get it is, does he get it when working with Indigenous nations? And we, in our Indigenous communities, we always say, when you work with our Indigenous businesses, when our Indigenous communities, you either get it or you don't. And people like Dave, get it. And so right off the bat, we know, okay, we share the same values as this guy does. And then the other thing we look at is again, everything that we do is never about one and done. It's always about leveraging it. So we saw an opportunity selfishly as Moccasin Trust Consulting to take our partnership and leverage it into another one and leverage that into 3 more, right? And so, the selfish part of me was saying, okay, well, here's a great opportunity, here's a great company, Craft Cannabis Co-op, and we want to use this partnership and to leverage it to get more. And we've done that. Again, I'm sure we'll talk about later, but we've got some other things that we're working on together. So we've been able to do that as well. So that's what we look for from our own selfish kind of point of view. And then at the end of the day, Frank and I we love sharing, we love teaching, we love educating our guests. It's our tourism background. We really look at it as a life journey in teaching people and educating people about who we are as Indigenous nations, whether you're from Saskatchewan or BC or Manitoba, Winnipeg or wherever. We honestly feel that this is a lifelong journey for us, and that we're going to keep doing this. And whether we're going to keep doing it in partnerships through cannabis companies or tourism companies or consulting companies, there's always a way where we're always can educate and teach our new partners in regards to Indigenous nations issues, and that's reconciliation. And we love doing that work, and it's a lifelong journey for us. And we honestly believe that that's how we're going to break down our stereotypes of our people. So.
Yeah, I would just add one little quick thing to that. It's quite interesting during our process, but we were clearly learning a lot from Greg and Frank as we went along, and you never stop learning in life. So I think adopting a continuous learning approach was good, but it was fun to work with Greg because Greg is not a cannabis guy. Certain types of folks that are in the cannabis business, and Greg and Frank were not cannabis guys at all. But it was very prominent in Indigenous communities and government because it's an important issue. But so it was really, I thought it was very reciprocal in the sense that I sensed that we were also educating Greg and Frank about cannabis and how it worked. And I think that there was this back and forth going on where we were both growing as people, we were both expanding our horizons. And I thought that was really, I felt good because there's this reality going on in our industry. Indigenous governments are finding their way on cannabis just like everybody else is. And it was really, I thought, good for us to educate Greg on cannabis and how it works. And I think that was a good example of where there was a good back and forth happening in terms of both of us coming out more enriched.
Amen.
You actually just preempted my next question there. So well, I think we can add a little bit more to that. So I wanted to ask about, because I think when we can always think of like kind of a concrete example or a time or an opportunity where you felt like okay, we got into this partnership for certain reasons, but I learned a lesson. I learned something that I didn't necessarily think I was going to learn. Maybe I would say it's unexpected, but I think in working with other people that you gain an experience that you wouldn't have otherwise. So can you just sort of point personally to a moment or a lesson or something that you were that became as a result of this partnership? I don't know, whoever wants to go first and go for it.
I'll go. Yeah. So for us, it was the challenge of learning the cannabis industry. Again, we're tourism people. We know very little about cannabis. Frank and I are not users. So it was this, there was moments where like, what are we doing? Like, we're working with cannabis, but we don't know anything about cannabis. It was that there was a lot of moments where Frank and I were like, holy cow, like, geez, we're learning so much here about cannabis. And David, like you talked about, is that the amount of information that I was able to gather, and Frank as well, was amazing. This industry has so much potential, so much potential. It is unreal, the potential that this industry has for Indigenous nations. And so for us to help is to learn from people like David and his team, and take those learnings and share those in our Indigenous communities so that other communities can benefit. That's what we love, and that's what we think that we're getting from this relationship with David and his team.
Okay, if I'll just kind of move on. I'm gonna switch.
I could add a little bit to that
Okay.
too, from my perspective, in terms of, I've had, 30 years in public service, but I learned again how much I enjoy working with Indigenous governments compared to federal, provincial, municipal governments. To me, Greg, we pulled together a group of leaders from the Indigenous governments, and we were talking issues, and these are people like Frank who are running government. And I just walked away, and I just feel so happy when I work with Indigenous governments. It's honest, it's direct, it's to the point. People do their research. It's some of the Indigenous groups we're working with, they have their own cannabis laws. They're incredibly well done. The professionalism, I just walked away going, there's so much frustration dealing with, people are lining up at passport offices. Our farmers are waiting 2 years to get a license to grow a small little cannabis farm. And just the approachability, the honesty, the integrity of working with the Indigenous governments, to me, this whole process with Greg at that event, but it just reaffirmed for me just what a good experience it is to be able to work with Indigenous governments to get things done. So that's I think something that really made it was even more clear to me from our meetings that we had, and stayed with me since.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so I am going to switch up the questions a little bit. And I just want to ask, for people who are unfamiliar, like the Regional Synergies webinar is to bring people who may not have interacted previously. So was there any advice or any kind of learnings that you learned from engaging in an organization or group that you may have not reached out to before? So for example, for a non-Indigenous company, to engage Indigenous people, like would you just is it as easy as just picking up the phone? Or like, what would you recommend, or any kind of advice that you would give to making that connection?
Yeah, well, it's definitely not as easy as just picking up the phone. I think that, first of all, having an open mind and making the decision in your mind that you want to do it, you must do it, is the first step. And I think that once there's a will, there's always a way. And I think that you go to your network, you do your homework, you have a basic understanding of how Indigenous governance works. In our case, we made the decision that we needed to do this. Our natural partner to organize a conference in Kelowna was Tourism Kelowna. And so we just asked, we said, okay, Tourism Kelowna, you're really good at tourism. This is a wonderful, part of the country with strong Indigenous, you're on Indigenous territories. Who do you work with? We can't be the first people who are asking these questions. And so Tourism Kelowna put us in the right direction. And then we also were working, of course, with Co-operatives first, and James was helping us out. And we asked him, and he said, this is a direction that you want to go. I know these people. So I think you rely on the professionals that you're working with. You ask their opinions. You say, look, this is really what we want to do. Can you help us? And then you kind of find your way. And so that's what we did. And we followed the advice of people who are experienced, who've been around the block a few times in Kelowna and in other places. That's where we were going with Kelowna, but we were just in Prince George doing a large event, and we did essentially the same thing. So I think you rely on local people to give you good advice, and that's served us well in this case. And then, but it starts really with the intent and the idea that you want to do it, conveying that to your project partners, asking for their help, and then they lead you to the right people. So for us, that's how it worked. It was something that you need to put a lot of time in. It's not something that you're going to solve in one afternoon with one phone call by looking by doing a Google search.
I think too, I must add to that is that, I just finished speaking about this yesterday. I was on a panel yesterday at a summit here in Kelowna, business summit. And it was, what you talked about, says is as simple as a phone call to the chief and council. And you should have seen our panel. They were like, it was like, how dare you? Like, first of all, you need to hold our chief and council up on people need to first realize, here's the first lesson. Chief and council is equivalent as your provincial government. So here in BC, it's John Horgan. He's the premier of our provincial government. Whatever province you're in, you have a premier. That is our chief's level. If you ever have a business question, or if you ever want to do business, do you just phone up your premier's office and say, oh, I'm thinking of this idea, I'm thinking of partnering up. You don't do that. You don't just phone up your premier. Well, we're the same way. You don't just phone up a chief and say, hey, let's partner up. You need to hold our chief and council to the pedestal of what is equivalent to a premier and his staff, because that's our chief and council. That's the level that our chief and council is at. And so it's not just a phone call, and we need to get away from the attitudes of, let's just phone the chief and council and let's present them this idea. You don't work. You don't just do that. There's certain channels you do. You don't just phone the premier of your provincial government. There's channels you have to go through. It's the same thing in Indigenous politics. So I need people to understand that, first of all. And then the other point is that, Canadians right now, and I talked about this before, Canadians right now are, business owners and entrepreneurs and CEOs and COOs of nonprofits and of business. They are at a point right now, and they should be at a point right now, where they're asking themselves, what can I do? I'm in a position of influence. I'm a COO of a company. I'm a business owner. I'm this, I'm that. What can I do to play my part in reconciliation? I need to reach out. And just like David advised you guys and gave you some great advice, reach out through your connections and your people. But don't just phone our band offices, guys. Don't just phone chief and council. And so, yeah, it's Canadians right now they need to incorporate reconciliation into their business, into their daily business. And we talked about this the other day on the prep call. And it's not just talking, guys. It's not just talking. It's not just having these conversations. These conversations are great and we need to have more of these. Absolutely. But at some point in time, non-Indigenous businesses need to invest in reconciliation. And we got to just stop talking about it. And what I mean by investment, is it a line item on your budget? Because if it isn't, then all you're just doing is talking. You really want to get serious and you want to have reconciliation, it's an investment. And it needs to be in your budget line item for next year. And you need to put some resources behind it. That is truly reconciliation. So I just want to add that part as well.
Thanks, Greg. I was just leaving a poignant moment there for the mic drop event. Yeah, I mean, was adding in what I've sort of heard from other of these regional synergies events is the relationship building trumps everything always. I guess maybe, I don't know. I keep saying it's like kind of a kindergarten assignment, but that's been a thing that I've learned, is that, you know, and there's always ups and downs with relationships too. There's good times, bad times, but commitment to a relationship is going to be important, instead of just saying a transactional thing like, yeah, we're just going to have something and then we're going to call it a day, and then we're not going to incorporate any other piece of, you know. I was at a conference and they had a opening thing and prayer. I was like, that was nice, and then there was no Indigenous content at the conference whatsoever, and it well should have been there. There were no panels, there were no sessions, there were no discussions, and I thought, okay, surprised me anyway.
And it doesn't matter. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to, because it's right at that exact point. But it doesn't matter what the conference subject is. It doesn't matter what the conference material is. I guarantee you, our Indigenous communities are talking about that subject. Whether it's tourism, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's cannabis, whether it's farming, it doesn't matter what the issue is. Indigenous nations are dealing with that in their communities. And we have a lot to contribute to your conference. So I wanted to add that because you were talking about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I see that, because, like, I mean, who would have thunk, you know, cannabis, but at the same time, it's opportunity, it's new, it's, you know, it's a place where industry is going. And anyway, okay, so sorry for that digression. I want to talk a little bit about, before we wrap up here, about the future of the partnership. I hope that's okay, Trista. I'm kind of skipping again with the order. Who needs it? Is kind of like what you're positioned to do now, because you talked about how this has laid the foundation for other things. So I want to talk about what are the other things, potential, and also maybe, I know something is scheduled, but I guess, like, what's next for this partnership, and whoever can answer first.
Well, I can add a little bit to that before Greg talks. You know, it really struck us when we were in Kelowna, and, you know, we integrated, you know, Indigenous pieces throughout the agenda and through the various sessions, in addition to having a dedicated one. But we had a special meeting before the conference even started with Indigenous government leaders, just a direct, you know, couple-hour discussion, just for us to learn and to see if there's ways that we can work together. Greg and Frank helped pull really solid leaders together. These were the, you know, best of the best in terms of the leaders from the Okanagan region. And, you know, it was a great meeting, but they said to us at some point, you know, you've invited us to your event on our territory. And we said, yeah, you know, I'm glad you're here, but you're right. And they said, well, maybe next time we should be having the event and we invite you onto our territory. And we said, where do we sign? You know, how can we support? So I think that was a very poignant, true moment, which we were, you know, ready to just kind of jump on and say, absolutely, how can we how can we help? So we certainly, as soon as we ended the summit, we started planning a second event, a special gathering to kind of keep the momentum going. First of all, on the issue of cannabis, period, it is a rapidly evolving issue for the whole sector, and the Indigenous governments are incredibly well positioned to create thousands of jobs in their communities. The healing pieces of cannabis in terms of medical help, we're working with groups in the downtown east side around cannabis being a substitute for people who are trying to, to get their lives back together from opiate addiction and so on. So I think that was a real opportunity, and we started planning that next event right after. The other thing that's going on right now in Canada is Canada has launched a full review of their Cannabis Act. There's a brand new law. It's historic in nature. A recent poll suggested that, when they asked people what they'll remember about Prime Minister Trudeau, it wasn't the response to the pandemic or climate change, it was the legalization of cannabis. It wasn't even reconciliation for that matter, considering how much work has been done. This is an issue that really resonates with the public. So the government has announced a review of the historic Cannabis Act after 3 years. And a big part of that review is how Indigenous governments and farmers and consumers are engaged. If you recall, when the Cannabis Act was first brought in, it was almost stopped in the Senate because of a lack of involvement by Indigenous governments. And that was very appropriate. The government of Canada did not do a good job of engaging Indigenous peoples on the Cannabis Act. So we will have a real opportunity now. We feel that the gathering coming up next month is in the context of the government admitting that their law has a lot of problems with it and wanting feedback from the community, including Indigenous stakeholders and also, our farmers and folks in BC and Indigenous governments. So it comes at a good time in the sense where we can do joint advocacy, as we like to call it in the cannabis business, to really look at where we have shared goals, how we can collaborate together for mutual benefit. We learned that from the discussions with Indigenous leaders in Kelowna, that's a goal, is, mutual benefit. Who benefits? Indigenous people must benefit from the windfalls that will be coming for cannabis, Indigenous governments, Indigenous farmers. And so to me, that was a really nice step. The next event that we do will kind of take us down that journey again. We'll be announcing next week our 2023 BC Cannabis Summit, and it will be a repeat and even take it up a notch or two. We'll be inviting Greg and Frank and the team to become fully integrated exactly like we did last time. And now that the partnership is established, I'm really excited to see what we can do in Kelowna. So we see these two kind of events kind of complementing each other and developing a critical mass of people with a series of actions that we can take forward and act on. And then at each event, we're kind of reporting progress back. We met together in April. These are the 5 things that we talked about. How are we doing now? Have we moved them down the road for the people that we represent? Yes, we have on these. No, we haven't on these. So how do we take it to the next step? So there's, to me, this virtuous loop now of engagement at which action should follow, real tangible results for the people that we represent. So I think, and that'll continue this year. Knock on wood, as long as I'm here, it should continue the 2nd year, the 3rd year, the 4th year, the 5th year, all the way down the road, because cannabis will be here for generations. And it will be employing, maybe Greg's kids or Trista's kids, for generations to come. So that's the exciting piece to me, is that we've kept it going, and I can't see it ever ending. I can't see any scenario where it would end.
Yeah, and for us, it was, going back to our little knowledge of cannabis. What we did first of all was we surrounded ourselves with people in our Indigenous communities that are doing great things with it. These are elected chiefs. This is economic development, business people, and we struck up a committee. And Frank and I said from the very start that this is not going to be a Moccasin Trails show. This is going to be a committee. And that committee was formed from this partnership. So that's number 1. We now have a committee, and an all Indigenous committee, cannabis committee. So that is a result of this partnership. This committee gathers weekly now to discuss the ongoing issues of cannabis. on a weekly basis. And again, so that's number one. Number two was, we had said when we had that meeting before the conference with David and his group and our Indigenous committee was, you know what, we are guests at your conference. The next time you're going to be guests at our conference. So we are having this Indigenous run, Indigenous owned, Indigenous managed, Indigenous developed cannabis conference summit. That is going to be geared around the harvest. And it's going to happen in Vernon, British Columbia in November. And so it is, and David and his group are like our advisors. So, he has been so gracious of his time and his energy and his knowledge and his expertise. And, we are really, really, he has given us so much. And so he is the one who is kind of guiding us, but make no mistake, David's the type of guy where he's like, hey, this is your conference. I'm behind the scenes. I'll help you get it going, but I'm behind the scenes. It's time for all of the Indigenous committee and the Indigenous owned farmers and retailers and elected officials. It's your time to be up there and take credit for all this. So lots of great things on the go. The result is this committee and the result is this Indigenous Cannabis Conference. I don't know if there's ever been an Indigenous Cannabis Conference in Canada. If there is, someone please let me know. I don't know if there ever has been one. We think that this is going to be the first one. And like David said, this is going to be the first of many. So there's those two things. And then also just the ongoing relationship that David talked about of just growing our relationship to even more. So we're looking forward to that as well. And I don't see this ending as well. So.
Thank you for sharing. Yeah, Heather posted the link to the details of the upcoming cannabis harvest gathering in the chat. We will be taking a few questions. If anybody in the anybody has any questions, please raise your hand or let us know. I don't see any hands going up, so I want to thank you for your time. I'll and thank everybody for attending. I'll just give Dave and Greg a big thank you, and if you have any last words, the floor is yours.
Well, I'll give Greg the last word because he's always good at kind of putting a nice exclamation point on things. But I just want to thank the group for having us today. It's great to talk about these things. Want to encourage all of you to continue doing the great work that you're doing in your community. I just want to personally thank Greg and Frank and the crew there just for their friendship and their trust, and great to see him, and we'll look forward to seeing him up in but thank all of you for thinking of us and having us, and thank Co-operatives for the great work that you're doing, and all the work you've done to help us out as well. So that's all I would add.
Yeah, again, thanks to Trista and your group and Heather for inviting us and pulling us together. It's we're in a pretty unique time right now, and like I said before, that we are in a time of reconciliation that, in Canadians, and especially non-Indigenous Canadians, need to find a way. They need to find a way to work with Indigenous nations in your municipality. Every municipality that's in this country shares an Indigenous nation beside it. Just think about that. And so if you don't have a relationship with your Indigenous nation, you need to start one. And that starts by going to their events, right? Indigenous Day, June 21st, September 30th, National Truth and Reconciliation Day. Every single one of our Indigenous communities has events. And not just during those 2 days, but also throughout the summer. They have powwows. There's great events that are happening in our Indigenous communities. Take your family there. Go and support them. If there's an Indigenous business, if there's an Indigenous coffee shop, instead of going to Tim Hortons or Starbucks for your coffee, go there, support them. If there's an Indigenous business, whatever it is, that's how you can play your part in reconciliation. And that moves from reconciliation to reconciliation. because the more Indigenous business and communities succeeds, the more we as Canadians will succeed. I need you to understand that. And so it is so crucial right now that you need to involve your Indigenous nations. There are Indigenous businesses, there are Indigenous tourism businesses, there are Indigenous farmers, there's so many Indigenous opportunities for you to work with your Indigenous nation. And if you don't know where to start, well, you know what? Trista can help and Heather can help. And if they can't, they'll phone me, I can help. But start somewhere, because that truly is how you're going to feel a lot better. And that's truly how you're going to elevate your business. And that's no secret. There's no secret recipe to it. It's not rocket science. The more you can include an Indigenous business and Indigenous community, you will elevate your business. That's the bottom line. And so, you know, this partnership that we talked about today proves that. It proves it, that the Indigenous content and the Indigenous involvement that David seeked out, it elevated his conference. And so there's a proven model here, and it's not rocket science. So I just want to end on that note. And I want to thank every one of you for listening and taking the time out. And thank Trista and Heather for pulling us all together. And thank David as well for his, it's good seeing him again. And I'm sure we're both of us are really looking forward to this conference in November. If any of you are going to be in the area, the link is in there. It's going to happen November 18th, I think. If you ever want to go to Vernon and come and spend the weekend with us, you'll see David and I there. Give either one of us a call. We'll definitely have you come out, and we'll introduce you to some pretty cool people out here in Vernon, and it'll be a great time. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, just another poignant pause there for mic drop. That was intentional. Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to say thanks so much for your time and for people joining. I mean, this is more than just the opportunity to share here. I mean, also sharing the recording with everybody who showed an interest in attending today but wasn't able to for scheduling conflicts or otherwise. And we always create posts and, you know, lots of, so we want to keep sharing this story and this partnership, and Trista and I want to keep telling more stories of partnerships where, you know, we found benefits and win-wins. So we're really passionate about that personally. And so thank you so much for telling a piece of your story in this partnership, and for sharing it with the group and taking that time today. So thank you so much. That can, you know, wow, look at this timing. It's exactly on the half an hour right now. So Trista, I think we win a prize. I don't know what it is, but we did it right exactly on the minute. Thanks for joining. And I just posted a link as well. Trista's doing an upcoming webinar in a partnership with Innovate BC, Cando, talking about River Select Fisheries Cooperative, which the link, you kind of have to scroll down. There's like a bunch of webinars on the page. So just, if you don't see it at the top, just keep going. And it's in there, and there's the Zoom link to join that one as well. And also, as Cooperatives First, we all host webinars. So check back at the, you know, keep posted. I think the best way to do that is sign up for that newsletter that I shared the link in together, Your Way Together, or you can just go to yourwaytogether.ca. And then you're kind of on the list there for hearing about events as they come up. So thanks so much again, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.